My name is Evan. I'm 15 years old, and my world turned upside down the day I uncovered the secrets everyone had been keeping from me. The drama had been brewing for some time. I used to reside in a 2-bedroom apartment in a tough neighborhood with my dad. My parents had split up when I was just a baby, and Dad never divulged anything about Mom and her side of the family, so I eventually gave up asking. As for my social life, I wasn't exactly the most popular kid in school, but I did have 2 close friends, Aurora and Samuel. We often stuck together, even if we didn't quite fit in with the rest of the crowd. We didn't mind, though, as we had one another's backs. Then, there was this one guy at school, Caleb, who I had a massive crush on. He was tall, handsome, and blonde. Regrettably, he didn't even know I existed. But everything changed when my dad had a work-related accident that landed him in the hospital. A social worker informed me that I had to stay with my grandfather. Initially, I tried to argue that I didn't have any grandparents. However, when she took me to visit my dad after his surgery, he finally confessed to the truth. Just like that, I was thrust into the care of Grandpa Coleman, my mom's father, someone I had never met before in my life. Before I knew it, I found myself in a taxi, hurtling towards the affluent part of town, leaving behind the grimy streets and cramped apartment buildings. As the streets widened, the houses and gardens grew increasingly grandiose. Eventually, the cab came to a stop in front of a pair of towering iron gates, and I began to question whether the driver had the correct address. "This is it," he called out from the back of the cab. Too nervous to respond, I handed him a $20 bill. The gates were enormous, and I pondered how to open them when the cabbie leaned out of the window and handed me my change. "Try the buzzer," he suggested before driving off, leaving me alone in what felt like the middle of nowhere. I stood there, my eyes fixed on the imposing gates for a few minutes. The black intercom box had a button on the front, and I hesitated before pressing it. A voice answered promptly. I introduced myself and, without delay, the gates swung open. I'd never been so nervous in my entire life as I cautiously made my way up the expansive gravel driveway, eventually reaching the grand mansion at the top. All I could do was stare in awe as a gray-haired old man opened the front door. "Mr. Coleman," I stammered. He shook his head and extended his hand. "I'm Ryan, your grandfather's secretary. Let's get you inside." The house was nothing short of incredible, adorned with antiques and expensive-looking artifacts. Ryan escorted me into a cozy living room, and I gingerly took a seat on the lavish upholstered chairs, brushing off any dirt from my pants before sitting down. "I'll fetch you some tea while you wait. Mr. Coleman will be with you shortly." I gazed down at my shabby shoes, bitten nails, and worn sleeves, wishing I had made a greater effort. There had been so little time. Who would have imagined that my mother's father was so wealthy? I couldn't help but wonder if I might finally get the chance to meet my mother. That's when I noticed the photographs adorning the wall. A series of pictures featuring the same woman, from infancy to adulthood, displayed an undeniable resemblance. Without thinking, I concluded that it must have been my mother. I stood up to examine the pictures more closely, lifting one to get a better look. "What are you doing, young man?" The voice behind me caught me off guard, and I dropped the photograph, which shattered on the floor. "You must be Paisley," the elderly man said, his brow furrowing. "Grandpa," he scrutinized me with his cold, gray eyes. "Albert will do. Now, let me have a look at you." I slowly turned to face him, feeling uneasy as his stern gaze roamed up and down. He studied me closely, and I was relieved that he didn't approach any nearer. I was nervous, sweating profusely, and likely smelled terrible. Despite it all, I could see the disapproval in his eyes. "In my day, we weren't allowed to be untidy," he remarked. "A stint in the army would straighten you young folks out. You've got it too easy. What do you think your father is thinking? We can't have you wandering around like this. The neighbors might call the police. Your mother would be turning in her grave if she could see you." In her grave. I couldn't help but scoff inwardly. "Didn't your father inform you?" His bushy eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Your mother passed away a decade ago. It was a car accident. Now I'll have my housekeeper get you cleaned up and show you to your room." With one final once-over, he rang a small bell to summon the housekeeper. "And tidy those fingernails. I can't stand dirty nails." With that, he departed. In that moment, my emotions swirled within me. I had just met my grandfather, but in the same breath, I learned that my mother was no more. I hadn't even met her, yet the news hit me with a profound sense of loss. I felt her absence keenly, and I had never felt so isolated in my life. Before I could dwell on it too much, the housekeeper whisked me away and escorted me up the stairs to my room. My God, my bedroom was larger than our entire cramped apartment, and I even had my own TV. I was informed that, after a shower, I would be taken into town for some shopping with my grandfather. I wasn't exactly looking forward to the experience. During lunch, I felt clumsy, unsure which cutlery to use. Grandpa and I dined in silence, and I wondered if we'd catch a taxi back to town. However, Grandpa had his grand Rolls Royce and a chauffeur waiting. Our first stop was at Grandpa's barber, where I received my first real haircut. I wasn't entirely sold on Grandpa's idea of a short bob, but then I realized just how long and unruly my hair had become. When I finally looked in the mirror, I saw a completely different person staring back at me. I even thought I detected a hint of approval in my grandfather's eyes. We spent some time at a department store, buying new clothes, really stylish stuff that Dad could never afford. Returning to school that following Monday felt strange, like I was a new version of myself. I felt glamorous and different, but my transformation seemed to create some awkwardness with Aurora and Samuel. Samuel thought I looked cool, but Aurora appeared angry and jealous. I almost felt the need to apologize for the change in me. For some reason, her inexpensive clothes and worn-out shoes suddenly caught my attention, and guilt washed over me. I tried to continue as usual for a few days, but I sensed the growing gap between us. Things reached a breaking point one Friday evening after school when Samuel and I had a senseless argument. I was about to be picked up by my grandfather's driver when Logan and Isaac approached, eyeing the buns. They were the two most popular guys in our class. "Hey, Paisley, we were wondering if you'd like to go swimming with us on Saturday afternoon." It was the first time these two had even acknowledged me, let alone spoken to me. I hesitated, suddenly feeling overwhelmed. "Caleb will be there," one of them added. It seemed like everyone in the school knew about my crush. I got into the car and agreed to meet them the next day. I couldn't shake the guilt. I typically went swimming with Samuel and Aurora, but they had been acting strangely all week. I was excited, albeit a bit nervous, as I headed to the pool the following day. Caleb was all I could think about. There they were, the popular crowd from my school, all coming to greet me as if I were a long-lost friend. It was funny how a change in my circumstances altered their attitude towards me, but I didn't dwell on it too much at the time. I was simply thrilled to finally be accepted, even if just for once in my life. "Hi," Caleb approached, his skin still glistening from the swim. All I could do was gaze at his magnificent physique. He gave me a broad smile, displaying a set of perfect white teeth. From that moment on, I was captivated by him. I was having a fantastic time, and when the group around me burst into laughter, I joined in, not fully grasping the joke. But I soon did. Aurora and Samuel had just entered the pool area. My heart sank as they drew nearer, and I felt overwhelming guilt, immediately ceasing my laughter. As the other boys around me continued to laugh, Caleb's raised eyebrow felt like a challenge. "Hey, Paisley," he called out loudly. "Aren't those your friends?" Samuel briefly locked eyes with me, but I turned away. He walked on, and the laughter resumed, though not from me. My old friendship seemed truly over, and I attempted to push my feelings aside. I was riding high on newfound acceptance. When Caleb agreed to be my date for the school dance, I couldn't have been happier. Back at school, I tried my best to avoid encountering Aurora and Samuel, but it was almost impossible since we shared the same class. I tried to justify our falling out by convincing myself that they wouldn't accept the new me. Deep down, I knew it was I who had changed, not them. My new friends were fun but superficial. Initially, it felt good not to be the target of their cruel jokes, but it left me feeling uneasy inside. One afternoon, on the day of the dance, as I walked down the hallway with Logan and Isaac, we accidentally bumped into Samuel. "You stupid idiot," Logan yelled. "Why don't you watch where you're going? Your glasses are thick enough." Isaac and Logan burst into laughter. But when Samuel attempted to walk away, they blocked his path. "Aren't you going to apologize?" Isaac demanded. Samuel remained silent, but I could see the sadness in his eyes, and it was almost unbearable. "Hey, leave him alone, you two," I interjected. They stared at me as if I'd grown two heads. "Make up your mind about your friends, Paisley," Isaac shouted. They moved aside to let Samuel pass, and it was at that moment I realized that these people weren't truly my friends. They could turn on me just as easily. I had looked forward to the dance and my date with Caleb all week, but somehow, I couldn't shake the feeling that I could have been happier. All I could think about was the look of betrayal in Samuel's eyes. I might have looked great, but deep down, I felt shallow and weak. As I descended the stairs, getting ready to be driven to the dance, my grandfather stood proudly at the door. I felt an overwhelming need to talk, and suddenly, everything that had transpired in the last few weeks spilled out of my mouth. I didn't anticipate my grandfather to fully understand. He was more likely to advise me to pull myself together. To my surprise, a look of sympathy washed over his face. He gestured for me to follow him into the living room. "I'm sorry, Paisley," he began. "I shouldn't have tried to change you. It's just that you remind me so much of myself at your age. Money and fancy clothes won't make you happy, dear," he continued. "I've been rich and poor, and neither brings happiness. But good friends, well, that's what truly makes you happy. I've been living up here alone for so long that I think I've forgotten how to be happy. Please don't make the same mistakes I did. I never forgave your mother for marrying your father. I didn't think he was good enough. Things could have been so different. Follow your heart, Paisley. Stay true to yourself and avoid following the crowd," he urged. With those words, he embraced me, and in that moment, I knew that our relationship was on the mend. Things were going to change, and I had something important to do. I rushed back upstairs, shed the new clothes, slipped into my jeans and an old t-shirt, and returned downstairs, feeling more like my true self. My grandfather didn't utter a word, just nodded his approval. It was remarkable how much of a difference my appearance had made. As I entered the school hall, I immediately spotted Logan and Isaac, and their disapproving glares were hard to miss. Even Caleb soon regarded me with the same judgmental look. Aurora and Samuel were standing alone in a corner, so I nervously approached them. "Hey guys, can I join you?" I asked hesitantly. Aurora and I hugged after I apologized for my behavior. When we finished, I turned to Samuel to do the same, but he had disappeared. I looked at Aurora, seeking an explanation. "Oh, Paisley, you hurt him so badly," Aurora said sadly. "Couldn't you see he was in love with you?" I was taken aback for a moment, but then a warm and fuzzy feeling overcame me. Samuel and I had always been close, but my mind had been so preoccupied with Caleb that I had overlooked what was right in front of me. I pushed my way through the crowd until I found Samuel at the bar, giving his shoulder a gentle tap. "Hey there," I greeted him with a smile. "Do you want to dance?" After that night, everything fell into place. Aurora and I were best friends once more, and I started dating Samuel. I had never been happier. Dad and I eventually moved in with Grandpa, and it turned out to be a perfect ending. I learned a great deal about myself and the significance of genuine friendship.